Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. Today, I have a very fun interview for you. I am introducing you to John Tan. John is the founder of CorkVision, which is an AI co-pilot for wineries powered by a smart assistant named Corky. I think you're going to love it. You'll have to look up what Corky looks like because he's adorable. But yeah, we're talking AI today, which I know is kind of crazy, but my other job, if you didn't know, is in the tech world. So I am surrounded by this conversation of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And if you're like, holy crap, Haley, I don't know what you're talking about, don't worry. This conversation is not going to be super techy. It's not going to be like something over our heads. It's meant to be something to understand how AI can help wineries and how it might affect you as a client and a customer of these wineries. So John had actually spent a decade building a tech company in New York. And then he moved out to Napa basically without a plan, just a curiosity for wine and a willingness to get his hands dirty. That led to working a harvest, which he has quite the funny stories about with that, and ultimately realizing how much time and opportunity wineries were losing to outdated tools, especially outdated technology. So today, he's combining his tech background with deep industry empathy to build CorkVision, a platform designed to help wineries sell smarter, connect with customers, and bring data to life through Corky, which he'll tell you where that came from. Corky I just think it's so cute. In this episode, you'll discover how John's career introduced him to the world of wine, the story on how he ended up in Napa, and nearly signed a lease before ever seeing the house after a night of wine tasting, what CorkVision is and how it uses AI to help wineries create a better experience for wine lovers like you and me. And of course, so much more. So with all that said, let's dive into the interview. Welcome.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Well, one of my favorite questions to ask wine lovers that I have on the show is just, how did you fall in love with wine? What was it that made you want to know more and do more in wine?
Yeah, no, I think so. It was kind of a journey for me. I didn't have an aha moment or an aha bottle where I said, oh my God, I had this bottle or this moment. I want to learn more. It was more of a progression over time. I was a co-founder of a tech services company back in New York, and being client facing, I ended up going to a lot of client dinners. Because our client dinners were mostly in the financial and legal verticals, and because it's New York City, a lot of those dinners were at steakhouses. And so had a bunch of Napa Cabernet with steak, because obviously that pairing works beautifully together. And once I started drinking more Napa Cabs, I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. So I actually visited Napa for the first time in 2012. And I fell in love with the area. It's obviously a beautiful area. I didn't envision myself moving to Napa 10 years later, which is where I am now. But that kind of kicked off that journey, was that first visit, having dinners with clients of ours and experiencing Napa wine and the pairing of Cabernet and steak. That's kind of what kicked off my love for wine.
Yeah, I love it. And I appreciate too that you're like, it's not just one wine. I feel like for a lot of people, it's like they can name a bottle. But I'm with you. I probably couldn't name one specific bottle that was like, oh, this is it. I want to know more about this. It was definitely more like a combination of lots of things, and it kind of slowly built until it was like, yeah, I got to know more about this.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I love about wine is obviously as a beverage, it's delicious, and there's a wine for everyone's palate. But because there's a wine for everyone's palate, there's also so much to learn, and you're always learning, and you're always trying to find more. And I'm the type of person that when I fall in love with something, I try to learn as much about it as I possibly can. And it is just so hard to know everything that's possible about wine.
Yes, it's literally impossible. My thing I say is like if anybody ever tells you they know everything about wine, they're wrong. Like
Exactly. Yeah,
there is no way. You just can't.
that's right.
There's always things going on. Well, let's talk a little bit about that moves from so you had a successful tech career in New York, but you moved out to Napa. You wanted to do something wine related, it sounded like. Did you always know it would be a fusion of tech and wine, or did you think it could be something else?
Yeah, great question. And no, I did not come out to Napa with the intent of bringing my tech background and my passion for tech into the wine space. I love New York. I will say that I lived in New York City for 21 years. I was very fortunate to experience New York for all of its wonder and challenges, of course. And like I said, I mentioned I was a co-founder there, and so I really grew up. I feel like I grew up in New York, but it got to a certain point where I wanted to leave. I had the fortune of being able to travel both professionally and personally, and I always wanted to say, you know what? People say that if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. I'm not saying I've made it in New York, but I wanted to say like I was doing okay in New York, so like let me see if I can figure out how else I can be. Can maybe be somebody else somewhere else? And actually, funny story about this. I was in Napa for a wine tasting visit with a really good friend of mine. We had gotten free wine tastings that day. We were meeting a friend, two friends actually, for dinner at a restaurant in St. Helena. And we got to the dinner early. So we had a cocktail and a beer after three wine tastings. We had three bottles of wine with our friends for dinner. And my friend mentioned, "Oh, I had this house for rent in Napa." And I was already thinking, like, I need to leave New York, but I don't know where to go. And so when she said that, I was like, tell me more. And she told me about it. And she told me about the house. She told me the price. And I was like, I will move today. Actually, what I said was, I will sign the lease today if you have
Oh
one.
my gosh.
And she said, are you sure? And I'm like, yes. So look, you don't want to look at the house. I'm like, I know you. I'm sure the house is fine. And she didn't let me sign the lease. She said, come back, take a look at the house, and then let me know. And so I came back a couple months later, and when I pulled up in front of the house, I was like, yeah, it's great. Like I didn't even need to go inside. I was like, this is perfect. And so that's how I decided to move to Napa.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I wanted to do. We had just sold our company about a year ago, and I was working for the company that bought us, and I was trying to find my way out of that. Or actually, I knew I was going to leave the company, but I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go. And so when I first moved here, I had an opportunity to work for a harvest with a winery in Calistoga. Fell in love with working harvest. I've never been more humbled in my entire life, coming from you know
Oh my gosh,
knowing
I
when I was
couldn't imagine. Yeah, like coming from the tech background and working in
yeah.
corporate and then like, here, work a harvest. It's like, holy crap, this is
Exactly.
different.
Exactly. I lost 30 pounds in 3 months. It was the best diet I was ever been on. My dinner every night was I live a mile north of McDonald's. So after we worked harvest, I would drive to the drive-through McDonald's, get large fries, come home, open a bottle of champagne, eat French fries, champagne, cry, go to bed, do it all over again the next day.
I can't tell if I'm like, if I'm jealous or not jealous of that.
You know what? It is if you love wine, and when I fell in love with wine, I realized I wanted to work harvest, but I didn't know if I would be able to take 3 or 4 months out of my career to work the harvest because I knew I didn't want to be in wine production. I just wanted to drink the wine, but I wanted to really understand, how do you make this wonderful beverage that I love so much and have so many memories for. And so I had that opportunity, worked harvest, saw some of the challenges that the industry faced from a production side, started talking to people in sales and hospitality, helped some friends in sales and hospitality, and also even in bottling, recognized basically common challenges around wineries that sell mostly direct to consumer. And I said, you know what? I think I can solve some of these problems. And that's kind of how I started thinking about CorkVision. And I spent 2 years before we started writing any code, just talking to wineries across different sizes, all mostly direct to consumer, but really talking to them and talking to different departments and different people and trying to understand where these challenges and pain points are and how can I help build a platform that solves these challenges.
Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. Yeah, I really want to dive into that because I think that's really interesting and definitely want to talk about CorkVision, but let's talk about like the inspiration behind it first of why creating it and and so we're talking about selling direct to consumer. So these are wineries that are primarily selling directly to people, mainly through wine clubs or from sales directly at the winery or online. So the idea is that they're not selling necessarily to stores or distributors and having them do it, just for folks who aren't sure what direct to consumer. So they're trying to get directly to the people, directly to you who would buy the wine. What were some surprising pain points from talking to all these different wineries? Where were they struggling?
Yeah, so I actually saw a lot of parallels between their pain points as well as the clients that had served in my previous company. So, as I mentioned earlier, we serviced a lot of the financial and legal verticals. You would think that because they're big businesses, they have millions, if not billions, of dollars that they handle every day. They have all of these advanced systems and processes that's all automated. It's not necessarily the case. And I saw that with the wine industry. And so because I'm targeting the direct consumer wineries, so which are typically the smaller wine producers, as you mentioned, not the wineries that are available at your retail shops necessarily or supermarkets. Those are typically owned by big companies like Treasury or Constellation. Being big companies, they have different teams working for them. They have different platforms. They may even build their own platforms that solve certain business functions for them. My target market, the wineries that I personally love and would love to support, are the direct consumer ones, the smaller ones. So they run very lean operations and lean teams. The person who's running sales may also be in charge of hospitality, who also may help out in the cellar when it's harvest time. So they're wearing multiple hats.
Yes.
And yes, and so they don't have all of these systems or processes necessarily in place to help automate the winery and also make them more efficient from a sales and marketing standpoint. And also, wineries do tend to have an older technology stack. So wineries, I think, should focus on what they do best, which is making beautiful wine, growing grapes, and farming sustainably for the next generation and future generations. So they're not really focused on technology. And so a lot of the platforms they use are older, or they may not be fully integrated with other platforms that they need to use. So we run into the other problem, which is data silos. In order for a winery to find information, they need to look at multiple platforms because they don't really have a single source.
Can you go into a little bit of like what kind of information would they be looking
Sure.
for?
Sure. So an easy example would be if I place an order with your winery and I send you an email and said, hey, can you give me status of where my order is? You would have to look at the platform that I placed the order in, maybe check the compliance platform because every online order has to go through compliance to make sure that they're applying the right sales tax, they have the license to sell to that county and that state and so on. Or you may have to ask your fulfillment house because a lot of wineries store their wines in third party fulfillment houses because of space. And so now you're looking at these three different sources of information to find out where my order is, and then write me an email to say, "Oh, hi, John, here's your order." So it doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but it can take 10 minutes. And imagine, especially when winery sales tend to be somewhat seasonal, especially with clubs. Imagine when you're processing club orders with thousands of orders, and now people are asking you, "Hey, where's my order? Where's my order? Where's my order?" Those 10 minutes can add up over time.
Definitely. Well, and especially when like the person who's responding could be the winemaker, could be the right, and like they're trying to do other things as well. It's not like just only their job to respond to emails.
Exactly. Yeah. And so those are some of the challenges that I saw trying to help with. And then the last part that I would say is that as we talk about wineries do run lean operations and lean teams, they don't have the people to sit down, analyze the data that they collect. They collect a lot of data in their normal sales activities and their normal marketing activities, but they don't have the people dedicated or trained necessarily to look at the data that these activities are telling them and figure out what they can do about it. Whereas the larger organizations, they may have data scientists on staff, they may have data analysts on staff that is responsible for looking at this data and then telling their marketing team, hey, here's what we think you can do to promote these wines, or here's a campaign you can run on email, and same thing with sales and so on. And so those are the three main problems that I saw with smaller wineries. And I said, you know what? I can help figure something out that will alleviate a lot of those challenges.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I know I've talked to a lot of winemakers, and it's amazing when you think about, first of all, how hard it is to make wine, and you're relying on so many different pieces. We've talked about how hard harvest is, and then you're relying on the weather to be good to you so you can make a good wine, and then when you go through it, you have to just like kind of hope that things are going to work out, and there's a lot of belief. And then I've heard from so many winemakers that, yeah, it might be hard to make the wine, but then it's also hard to sell the wine. Like we've made it and we've done all that, and now you have to do the business side of it. You have to do the marketing and the sales because there's so many wineries out there. People aren't just going to knock on your door and ask you for wine. And
Yeah,
I feel like that's an area where, like, if you go into winemaking, you're probably not as interested in the business side of things. You want to
exactly.
make the wine, you want people to drink your wine. You don't want to worry about how you're selling it or like how that's happening. So I think that makes a lot of sense with like diving into those problems for them. So let's talk about the solution you created. So CorkVision, or it sounds like you call it Corky, which is very cute. I love that. You describe it as an agentic AI platform. Can
Mm.
you explain what the heck that means? And let's just imagine you're explaining it to someone who like has no idea what any tech jargony words are.
Yeah, of course.
I love producing this podcast for you every week. But here's the truth. It's not free. That's why I'm so grateful for sponsors like the following brands supporting me so that I can share everything I love about wine with you. If you're able, show them some support back. Anyone else guilty of opening a bottle of wine for just one glass and then finding it a week later in the fridge totally undrinkable? Yeah, that used to happen to me all the time until I started using the VacuVin Wine Saver. It's so simple to use, easy to throw in my bag if I'm heading to a friend's, and it keeps wine fresh for up to 10 days, proven by independent lab testing. VacuVin invented the original wine saver back in 1986, and now over 40 million wine lovers around the world use it. With VacuVin, you get to enjoy wine on your terms. Open Italian red for Tuesday pasta night, and it'll taste just as good a week later with pizza. Go to us.vacuvin.com and use code CORKANDFIZZ for 20% off your first order. I'll be honest, I never really believed chocolate could pair well with wine until I partnered with Bon Chocolates for a local event. Rasha, the owner, created 4 incredible truffles that matched perfectly with the wines we were tasting. Bon Chocolates is a European-inspired chocolatier right here in the Seattle area, making beautiful bonbons and confections with fine chocolate and all natural ingredients. No preservatives, just pure flavor. Visit their local shop in Bothell or order online at bonchocolates.com. They make the perfect gift.
Well, I will try to because if you ask 10 people who work in AI what agentic AI is, you're probably going to get 12 responses back.
Sure.
But for what we're building, when we say CorkVision is an agentic AI platform, it doesn't mean that it's waiting for you to ask questions or waiting for you to do something. It acts more like a smart teammate that notices kind of what's happening in the winery and suggests what to do next. So, for example, we're able to analyze inventory data from wineries. And when we notice something, say your 2020 Chardonnay is running low on inventory, we will notice that and we will say, hey, we noticed your 2020 Chardonnay is running low on inventory. Would you like me to identify the customers who've previously purchased that, create a marketing segment with those customers and generate an email to them to say, by the way, we're running low on our 2020 Chardonnay. We know you've purchased it before. Would you like to buy some? Because what's your last chance to purchase? Click here. So it's a platform that identifies trends and allows you to take initiatives to take advantage of those trends. And that the goal of us is to be able to help increase winery sales because to your point, you're absolutely right. Winemaking is super, super hard. Selling wine is also a challenge, especially in today's changing marketplace. So that's what agentic AI is for me. So a platform that's able to understand your business processes and your goals and to try to help you automate and become more efficient with that.
Interesting. Okay, so it's not like, I feel like a lot of people, when they think of AI in general right now with the general population, it's like Chat GPT or Gemini, where you're like typing in a question and you're
Yep.
asking for something. And so you don't necessarily have to do that with CorkVision. It's kind of doing a lot of behind the scenes work for you and bringing things forward rather than you having to ask it.
Yeah. So we do have the chat component to it, and that's how wineries will mostly interact with CorkVision. So Corky, it's a little French bulldog made out of wine corks, and he's inspired by Clippy.
Yes, I was just gonna say, is it the Microsoft Word little paper clip? Oh, I remember him. Yes.
Exactly. Except Corky will be a bit more helpful than Clippy
Sure.
was.
Yeah.
So Corky, our AI agents, you can always press Corky's face, as we have a little button on every screen where Corky's face is. You can click on it and you can open up a chat window and you can talk to Corky and ask questions like, hey, what wines are moving the fastest? What wines are moving the slowest? Where's John's last order? What is the status of it? How did my sales go last month? What do you recommend for us to focus on this month to sell our wines? Like, we'll be able to have those interactivities, but that is one form of AI. AI, and this is a kind of like a common misconception for people who don't work in technology. They think, oh, AI is OpenAI, ChatGPT, Gemini. Yes, that is AI, but it's not the only thing about AI. There's so many different underlying technologies about AI that we are using to help wineries derive actionable insights for their data. So the example that I mentioned earlier about being able to spot these trends, that is machine learning. Our AI is learning the trends of the industry, of the winery specifically. See, okay, here's what's happening from a sales standpoint. Here's what we recommend that you can do to either take advantage of this trend or perhaps fix this trend if the sales are trending down.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's talk about some more real world examples. I feel like that helps kind of place this in people's minds of like what's going on and how it's helping. So I know we gave one example, which is a perfect one with like when you're thinking about even like, obviously this is help for winemakers and for winery owners, but I'm also thinking a lot of the folks listening to this are wine drinkers more than they are winemakers, right? And so the example you gave was great where it was like, oh, if you bought this Chardonnay before and you really liked it, the nice thing is as it's running low, the winemaker might not notice that, but Corky will, and will let that what's going on. Can you give some more examples? And feel free, they can be both a combination of, what helps a winemaker and the winery, but also what, benefits could, customers see with
Yeah,
wineries that are using this.
absolutely. So I'll answer this question by kind of talking about a story that inspired me to build some of what I'm building, some of the
Sure.
CDC shows. Do you ever watch The Bear on Hulu?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
love that show. Fantastic show. And I'm into fine dining, love fine dining. Been fortunate enough to eat a lot of those for those restaurants. And the example that they gave where Carmi's brother was walking in the restaurant, working in the restaurants, for the fine dining restaurants, and he heard a guest saying he wanted a Chicago pizza, but it was their last night there. And so what did he do? Goes to the chef, says, Chef, heard this. Chef says, go grab a pizza and bring it back, and we'll make it something memorable for him. So that part of the story, the Hulu story, or the Bear story, excuse me, was inspired by 11 Madison Park in New York City, 3-star Michelin dining restaurants, where one of the captains overheard a guest saying, I wish I had a New York City hot dog. I didn't get a chance to. So Daniel Hume, Chef Hume, said, go to the hot dog stand in the corner, buy a hot dog, bring it to me. And then, he did whatever he did to it. And they presented the New York City hot dog to the guest free of charge. Just an off menu, obviously. They don't serve New York City street hot dogs in a 3-star Michelin restaurant. But that type of personalized attention and that type of service means that they will now have a customer for life. And also that is the best marketing that you could ever have, is that's authentic. And that is something that that person who experienced that will talk about forever. And I was not there. I've never experienced it. I don't know these people, and I'm talking about it. So it is truly the best marketing that you could have. I want to be able to bring that to wineries. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, personalization is something that people are looking for today. It's something that I look for when I go to a winery. And I don't expect this for a winery that I've never been to. But if I've been to a winery before, I'd like for them to say, oh, hey, welcome back. We know you tasted these wines the last time. We know you like to purchase these wines. We've curated a special flight for you. We know you haven't had this vintage, so we're this. We know you really like this wine, so we're pouring this. And for your guests, it's special because it's something that we don't normally pour. So wineries do that today, but it's a lot of work and effort for them to find all of this data because they have the different platforms that we talked about, and then put all this information together to curate that flight or that tasting experience. So the advantage there is twofold. One, for a consumer, if I'm the recipient of this experience, I'm always going to remember that. I'm going to feel special just knowing the fact that, hey, I was here. You know what wines I bought. You know what wines I tasted. And also, you're making me look good in front of my friends because you're saying, hey, welcome back. Here's a special flight for you. And from the winery standpoint, that's driving customer loyalty and retention because I will always remember that as the guest. And so those are some of the things that I'm working on and I'm building within CorkVision to allow wineries to give these more personalized experiences in a more automated way instead of exporting a bunch of spreadsheets together, asking people, hey, what did John taste last time? Do you remember what John bought previously? Like, yeah, we'll have all that information and Corky will be able to say, by the way, John's coming in on Tuesday, 2 p.m. Here's what we recommend.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. It makes me think about, there was a restaurant around here in Seattle that my husband and I used to go to, and they had a great wine list. And I always ordered a bottle of white wine, almost always. And they noticed that because not a lot of people order white wine when they're out, which I think is such a miss. You should order more white wine while you're out. It's great. But they'd always notice. And, and that was something that I loved. And I loved going back there knowing that they knew what I like to drink and what I'd have. And what I thought about was interesting was because then that guy stopped working there, the one that knew what I ordered. And so all the information about me and being a regular left with him, right? And so, because I think it's interesting with AI, and I definitely want to talk about this later about like a lot of people worry about technology and AI taking over for like these human things. But to me, it was great that that guy knew that. And obviously that was just information he had, but then he left. And then that experience was totally gone with him and the restaurant couldn't replicate it and couldn't do that. And so I think the way you're describing it definitely sounds like it's one of those things where like, it's still humans doing the thing. Like, it's not like, and they'll probably remember as soon as they see it on the screen, they're like, oh yeah, John really liked the 2020 Chardonnay or whatnot. And so, oh, I do remember him liking that, but it's just like the help of the clicking and putting things into place so that everyone can have that experience, not just the person who comes like every other week.
Exactly. And you hit two very key points there. One is that there is that institutional knowledge that's lost when somebody leaves. In your example, the restaurant, for what we're talking about, if a host leaves the winery, their knowledge about certain guests can be lost. So there is the challenge there from a winery standpoint. And then from an employee standpoint, they're thinking, oh my God, well, if AI is going to do all of this, what am I going to do? Why am I going to still have a job? So the answer to that for me is like, I'm not looking to replace a person with AI. With the example that I gave, where we're able to identify who purchased this particular wine, it's running low on inventory, and creating that marketing email, there's always going to be a human in the loop for it. Meaning, we'll help you identify what this is, but you'll have to say, yes, I want to do that, and yes, I want you to create that email. But Corky will never send that email automatically. Corky will say, here's the email content. What do you think?
Yeah.
And so the human will always be in the loop before anything is sent out to other humans. And the other thing is also when I'm buying wine or when I'm tasting at a winery, I want to talk to the humans behind it personally. And I think people do. People want to interact with other humans. They don't want to read, tasting notes on an iPad, or they don't want to hear a recorded conversation about the wine. They want to listen, like you and I are having a conversation. They want to have that interaction. They want to have that human touch that will always be there. What AI and what I'm trying to do is trying to make that human become more efficient and become more knowledgeable without having to do all of the hours of work that they don't need to be doing. They need to focus on interacting with people, making their guests feel welcome, and selling the wine.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so well said. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. You can learn more about Corky and CorkVision on their website at corkvision.com. And if there's a winery that you love that you think would benefit from all the things John was talking about, be sure to mention CorkVision to them. If you loved this episode as much as I did, please take a quick second, if you haven't yet, rate it and leave a review. That is super helpful in me growing the podcast and reaching more wine lovers like you. In next week's episode, you'll hear part 2 of my interview with John, where we talk about how John is ensuring that wineries preserve human creativity in wine while using CorkVision. He talks about what wineries' responses have been to CorkVision and using AI, which I think you'll be surprised by, because I was kind of surprised by their reaction. how technology and AI can help winemakers adapt to challenges like climate change, and the $25 bottle of Spanish wine you should be bringing to every dinner party, as recommended by John, and so much more. Thanks again for listening. If you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. Cheers!